the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all. Always fun. It's the broken up audios. All right. Where shall we start? Vacation payouts we're not going to address in great detail at this point. But it sounds like we're going to have a serious conversation about this. I recall from our meeting, we decided that anybody that has vacation that's going to go beyond the rollover, and they're going to lose it because we forbid them to take vacation during COVID, that we would pay them the amount of hours they were going to lose. But it appears that many town employees are putting in for the vacation hours and expect to be just paid for them. Certainly not the intent I had. I don't believe that was a decision we made. And we'll have to cover that, I think. But not right now. You guys have any comment on that?
No, I agree. If they weren't told by their supervisor that they could not take vacation, then they don't fit in this category.
I think we went further than that. There's very few we held over. It had to be held for COVID reasons. Other than I think they had a couple of employees, and I think the police were put on 12-hour shifts and mandated no vacation. I haven't heard of anyone else that's been denied vacation.
DPW wasn't allowed to take vacation, is what I was told when I spoke to the superintendent.
Why? We didn't.
He considered his crew essential to the services of the town in this situation. We weren't asked, and we're not as a board of selectmen, the only people that approve what his decision is. So it's a policy decision, and it doesn't necessarily require a board decision. He's given that right to say you can't have vacation. It's his job. It's his authority. So if that's what he did, then you'd have to ask him why, but he didn't need our approval to do it. That comes under his job as a superintendent to determine if he's going to approve vacation.
Not what I understood we were doing with our motion, so we'll have to go back through and look into our motion and see what's going on with that. I believe we were very clear that if we were denied because of COVID, and this was going to affect very few people the way we did it. It was absolutely not intended to be a buyout of people's vacation times because they didn't feel like taking time off because there's nothing to do. But we'll readdress that. If we don't tomorrow evening, we may have to meet Monday and address it Monday specifically. But I don't want to spend any more time on that now other than calling it to the attention so we can think about it for next time. Next thing we have is a request for a part-time officer appointment by the chief. Is chief on here or no? I don't see him.
I don't believe so.
I can find it. We do have it on one of these forms.
Recommending Matthew Matarosen be hired as a part-time employee, part-time police officer.
Very good. Dylan?
I'm looking for the document too.
Well, Matt just read the name. That is the name.
Yeah.
So if you want to second that, we can.
Sure, yeah, I'll second the motion.
Great. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion on the matter? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Not Urban. Aye.
Dylan Clark, aye.
And Greg O'Sullivan's yes. So we carry unanimously on as a part-time officer. Trying to go back and forth and keep up with this agenda here. All right, the next see we have Brian on here and Claire.
And Eric.
And Erica. You guys, Brian, why are you joining us tonight? To review the warrant articles, or?
Well, yeah, I'll probably do that too, but Claire had mentioned something about disagreement with a couple of the articles as far as our favorable, our unfavorable and your favorable, as far as the cable savings fund account and the ambulance.
Okay, I would rather address that tomorrow night, because we do have a few things we have to get through, and we're gonna have an hour and a half of interviews. If that's okay with you all, we can address that. Can we go through it tomorrow evening?
Absolutely.
You guys all right with that?
Claire?
Everybody, Matt, Dylan?
Yes.
So I'd like to delay the warrant articles and the issues till tomorrow evening. And if there's anything else anybody has, I'd listen to it before we go into the interviews. But that's my plan next, is to get into our interviews for the interim town administrator.
Of course, the next, tomorrow night is the hearing.
Yes.
I generally like to go into the hearing with everybody on the same page, but I guess being the circumstances we're up against this year, we won't be able to do that.
Yeah, if we were going to do the warrant articles, we do them after our interviews, because those are going to be in a tight schedule. We need to get into those, and we have people dialing in Zoom. If you all want to hang around till after 8 o'clock when we're done with these and see if we feel like delving into it, you're welcome to. But I thought, in the essence of saving everyone's evening, we just put it off to tomorrow night and have to cover them as we go.
Greg, we plan on hanging around.
All right, that's up to you.
So much.
Yeah.
We're going to do that.
All right. I will postpone that. Oh, I might tap a best not die before we're done with this. Heather, what time will we have our first candidate ready?
You should be tuning in at 6:45. So
We still have a couple minutes. So why don't we kick around something on the warrant for a couple minutes, since we have about 6 minutes. Let's fill that in with that. Or we already lost everyone.
no, I think we're here. Did you want to jump to the articles that are the ones contentious with the?
Yes.
Okay, so the first article, I don't have the number in front of me, but well, I guess we can do it either way. The easiest one is the number I know, which is number 21, and that's the cable article.
Right.
Appropriate $100,000 from free cash.
Right. Do you all understand why we put that
Who's
article
saying
in?
appropriate from free cash?
The $100,000. Where were you planning to appropriate it from, Matt? For the cable article?
That was free cash.
That was the multiple options yet to be determined. It was intended to, I thought, to be a loan authorization, because we may not have to use the full 100 or do it all in one shot at any point. This is something that is going to require coordination with the cable company, potentially with state agencies to get additional. So what we're trying to do is get the town to commit certain funds so that we can go to the state and the cable company and say, we have committed a certain amount of funds. Will you partner with us? And then we can take next steps. But without having something to bring to the table, you don't have a lot to get back from the state or the cable company if you're not showing that you've got some town commitment to taking next steps.
I understand that.
So from my perspective, it wasn't take a loan out right away or even use free cash right away. It was to give us that authorization. And then as the plan moving forward plays out, you choose the appropriate method to use in funding it based on that. Because we might not have our answer till September or October on what we need to actually commit. And at that point, we might look at it, it'd be better to take a loan rather than use free cash, because we'll be looking at a different situation financially, maybe.
Matt,
Yes, Claire.
the federal government is talking about giving loans for internet and for other things, And they're talking about trying to get it across the country that all places will have it, putting in the infrastructure.
So if that happens by the time we make a decision, then that might be the type of loan we take. But we still need the town to authorize doing that.
It's something we've decided that we need to move forward with. We have to take steps to provide internet service to the rest of the town.
I understand that, but maybe we can do the article without any money appropriated? Or not? I don't
We
know.
have to identify a total amount of money, but we don't necessarily have to identify whether it's free cash or borrowing or other methods.
Okay. Yep, the other question I have is the cable savings fund account. That's showing on our paperwork here is $436,000.
The PEG access funds to pay for the annual, like, Rich Degon type.
I don't know, but on the paperwork, Heather has shown a line item here. I don't have it on me.
Can you resend that, Heather, in email? Because I couldn't find.
Yeah, so what Brian's talking about is the cable access fund balance we have. That money got there from the agreement with the cable company that we do every 10 years for capital funds, as well as for usually sometimes proceeds from the annual billings go there as well. It depends on how the town sets it up. Someone else asked me about that. I think it was Jean earlier this week, Brian. The answer I have is I don't know. That would be a really good question for Joshua, who runs the cable access company, because he might have a better understanding when they did the agreement for the 10-year contract, what the requirement and limitations were to the capital. Usually, most towns have those funds that go towards actually funding the cable access. So if you have a town that has a company or a nonprofit that runs all of your cable programming, we have Rick Degon who does ours for us. He's just one person, but in some towns they usually have a company or an organization who does it, and that goes to funding their program to be able to do it. So I don't know how the contract was set up. We can ask Joshua on that though.
But it's possible we have that money we could use to extend the service.
But we have the money. The question is whether or not those funds will be utilized.
Oh,
I don't know.
okay.
Shouldn't we investigate to find out before we go setting stuff aside if we've already got monies in there that we could use? And then if the federal government comes through, the town would be in good shape.
The idea is to put this out there to raise appropriate transfer or borrow, to set up so we have any way we can to do it. Obviously, we'd rather have the federal funds or something else first, or we could use the PEG access funds if it's allowable. But we want to make sure we take the step to allow for money to be spent so that we can start supplying people with cable and internet access that don't have it. And we need to put this, we're looking to get the approval on the warrant for that amount of money, and we're going to do it the best way possible moving forward. But I think we need to have that on there to let people know we're trying to deal with this.
Could we push this off to a special town meeting that we know we'll probably have to have in the fall, or October, I would say, when we know more on the COVID and what our state funds come back to us?
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut this off now. We're at 6:45. We have to get into our meetings, but we will get back to it and decide what we can do later. It gives us something to start with. Heather, if you would, please invite Evan to join our meeting.
Levy's with us now. Evan?
Hi there. How are we this evening?
Good, Evan. How are you?
Good. Happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. I'm going to read a quick spiel to you here, and then we'll get going. Good evening, and thank you for joining us today to interview for the interim town administrator position. Before we get started, we'd like to give you an overview of how today's interview will work. My name is Greg O'Sullivan. I'm the chairman of the board of the Selectmen. I also have Matt Urban and Dylan Clark with me, both board members. Attending today is our current town administrator interim Heather Monroe and administrative assistant Sandy Hood. We have other people that are online here from the public and some from our committees that'll be viewing. We're recording this and broadcasting live on YouTube channel, and will later be replayed on local public access station. We're looking for an interim town administrator to start as soon as possible, as our current interim administrator will be departing on the 30th to take another position. We posted a second round for permanent town administrator and expect to begin interviews process for that in early July and complete the process by August. We're looking for an interim to help us during this time, and we'll invite the interim to apply for the permanent position as well. The interview will last for about 30 minutes and consists of 7 questions that we've divided up amongst us. And at the end of the interview, we would like to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions that you may have. After all the questions, we will then thank you and ask you to depart the meeting while we discuss it. It's possible, you can see I have a great helper here, that's my 4-year-old granddaughter.
You're a good multitasker, Mr. Chairman.
Challenges of working from home. It's possible that we will reach a decision this evening and invite a successful candidate to join us back at the end of the meeting in executive session to discuss contract terms. Heather will be in touch at the end of the meeting to provide any additional information or follow-up. Do you have any questions before we begin, Heather?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm ready to go when you are.
Excellent. Dylan, you have the first question. You have the floor, so to speak.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Kenny. Thanks for joining us. Can you tell us why you're interested in this position?
First of all, I love, on more of a personal note, I guess, I love this area of the state. I think it's beautiful. I went to school at Fitchburg State University, so I have a little bit of a special connection to Central Mass. But on a professional note, I think for a town like Barre, Worcester's continued growth, even in these uncertain times, creates great potential for a community like Barre. And so that's an exciting opportunity to come in and try to take the helm in capitalizing on that growth in the area. And overall, I love municipal government. I've been in it for, I think, 7+ years now, in an executive position full time for most of that. And there's something really uniquely special about and heavy about the responsibility of being a steward of taxpayer dollars. It's something that I've always put at the very top of my list of priorities. You're not dealing with your own money here. You're dealing with somebody else's money, and in some cases, it's money that folks are scraping by to afford to give to the municipality. So it's an honor, and it's a very, very high responsibility that I take very seriously. So in a nutshell, I'm really excited about this opportunity for those reasons, among many, many others.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Kenny, my name is Matt Urban. I'm Vice Chair of the Board of Selectmen. What do you think qualifies you for the interim town administrator role?
I think chiefly it's my experience in municipal government. I do feel I have sort of a proven track record of success leading a municipality. You see from my resume, I was in Amesbury for 6 years. On taxes, for example, we came in 2014. And Amesbury's tax rate was the 4th highest in Massachusetts at 2097. It was 4th out of all 351 municipalities in the state. And in 6 years, in 2014, we had the highest average bill in the county. And that bill was 45% above the county average. 6 years later, in 2020, when we left, we had the 106th highest rate, from 4th to 106th. We brought it down to 1718, which was a cut of over 18%. And we had the 3rd highest average tax bill in Essex County, and that was the first time since 2003 that we didn't have the highest average tax bill in Essex County. When we got there, I think we had about $2 million in excess levy capacity. I know I'm getting a little wonky here, but you folks probably know what that term means. The amount of money that basically was left in taxpayers' pockets, the amount of money we taxed below Prop 2.5 limits. And when we left, it was nearly $5 million in excess levy capacity. And I really pride myself on the role I played in that. We tried to spend taxpayer dollars as fiscally responsible as possible, and I think those numbers show it. With respect to economic development, we really had a great track record. We, after 6 years, we added, it was $200 million worth of new development, hundreds of new jobs. And a lot of that was largely due to the tax increment financing program. But just for some highlights, we had a $70 million hockey complex. It was 6 rinks, 400,000 square feet, multi-phased. It brought in all kinds of, and it's going to bring in all kinds of additional economic activity in the area. Several hotels and several housing accomplishments as well. And with respect to education, this is a big one. It's, in Amesbury, it was a strong executive position. So it was a strong mayor form of government. And when we had come in, there had been nearly a decade of cuts to the school department. And I mean, when I say cuts, I mean services, staff, programs. And we went 6 straight years of maintaining or adding services to the schools while still accomplishing those tax goals that I talked about earlier. And we did that through really sound, sometimes tough fiscal management. And we also did it in concert with really focusing on growing our commercial industrial base. So without being too long-winded here, those are sort of the highlights. And so I think the track record speaks for itself. But I also think on a less quantifiable level, the key to management, the key to leadership, the key even to collaboration and teamwork is the ability to understand people. You have to understand the people you're working with or managing, and that is a skill I believe I have. I think it makes me a capable leader, and hopefully you folks will agree that after looking at my resume, my track record shows that as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Next, Evan, what do you see as the role of the town administrator in an interim position as opposed to a full-time position? How do you see the interim role?
With particular emphasis to interim versus permanent, I actually, if I'm fortunate to be selected tonight or after this meeting, I'll commit that I'm not going to treat it as an interim position. I'm going to treat it as if it's a permanent position. It's not going to be a cup of coffee for me. If it turns out that way, that is what it is. But I'll approach it with the same sort of goal-oriented vision and approach, and the commitment to execution for the betterment of the community, as if I were there long-term. And that's the only way a leader can make good decisions is if they're aligned to the organization's overall goals. And the board sets those, right? So whatever it is, your goals, visions, my job as interim or permanent town administrator is to sort of be your COO, your CAO. My job is to execute whatever plan, vision, or goals you folks have in mind. And I always have to remind myself of this, and I'm sure you all do too when you go to the corner store and run into your constituents. Serving constituents is always the number one priority, whether you're an elected official or an appointed official representing the electeds. I'll tell a story. Back February 2015, it was about a year into my tenure. I was pretty young, and I had this. I remember the administrative assistant was out. I was the only one in the office at the time, and I had this really important list of.
Evan, I muted you. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
I was checking to see if someone else was making noise, and my mouse took its mind on its own. Yours?
That's okay. That's okay. That's a 2020 problem, I guess. But so I was really stressed. I was overwhelmed. There were deadlines with all this stuff that I thought was important, and it was. And I was thinking, I really hope nobody calls. I really hope nobody walks in that I have to deal with. And a gentleman walked in, an elderly gentleman. Turns out he was in his 90s. And my first reaction, honestly, was, oh crap, now I'm distracted for the next 30, 45, 60 minutes. And boy, did I ever get a lesson out of that. He was a 90-something-year-old World War II veteran. I spent an hour with him, and I forgot completely about all the stuff that I thought was important. He wanted to talk to the mayor's office about whatever it was. And I don't remember what exactly it was that he wanted, but I remember connecting with him, and I remember hearing his stories, and he was happy to talk. And his name was Mike Graney. He actually recently passed away, but and we did lose an American hero when he did. But he taught me that day, and I really will never forget it. To never forget who you're serving and the amazing people that are in these communities that you're serving, and that no matter how complicated and how stressful and how important and high level you think your to-do list is, you're always working for the people that you serve. And so after all that stuff, and I can talk to you all day about high level management, budgets, and financial management, and whatever else you want to get into that's complicated and wonky in the municipal government world, you can't lose sight that you're ultimately serving the constituents that elected you folks, and that's your most important job.
Okay, very good. Dylan, you are up again.
Sure. Could you tell us about how you would go about handling critical items that you do not know how to do? What steps would you take to get the education and knowledge to fill in the gaps that you might need?
Sure. I in a situation like this, first of all, you're always learning in municipal government. You can't possibly know it all. You're always learning, and as soon as you think you do know it all, the law changes, or the regulation changes, or a new problem comes up, or a pandemic hits, an unprecedented situation like that. There's always something new to learn. The number one rule for me, it really applies across the board, but especially in a situation like this, is don't speculate on that which is knowable. Ask if you don't know. An important lesson I was fortunate to learn at the very beginning of my career was you need to sort of learn what is okay to not know, if that makes sense. When you are the CAO, you folks are the collective CEO, you're not going to know every little detail of everything that's going on in every department, no matter big or small town. And when I started to feel comfortable, it was when I realized it's okay for me to not know the answer to a certain question off the bat. It's okay to realize that this actually isn't supposed to be my expertise. It's supposed to be, a department head's expertise. And so that's an important, I think, quality of a leader. You sort of have to, or a manager, you have to learn how to delegate, and you have to learn how to trust the people who you need to trust, your staff, the other stakeholders in the organization. You're never going to be an expert on everything in a role like town administrator. And so a mentor of mine, this quote has always stuck with me, and I usually butcher it, but I think it's an accurate paraphrasing of what he taught me. True leaders, real leaders, they should be constantly asking themselves, and those around them whom they trust, the team that's around you, you should always be asking, am I doing the right thing? There's no shame in that. And so in a situation where you don't think you have all the answers right away, and oftentimes you don't in municipal government, you have to, you shouldn't have too much ego or too much pride to go ask the people who know better than you. And so that's number one. You have to go ask the right questions. You have to ask the people who have the answers, and you keep asking until you find them. On some level, you have to rely on your instincts in these situations, but if there's an expert there and you can avoid speculating on something that's knowable, just ask the question.
Thank you.
All right, Matt. Matt, you're up again.
Yes, sir. Mr. Kinney, can you tell me how you organize, plan, and prioritize your work?
On a sort of basic day-to-day level, I'll start at the bottom here, I guess. I use certain project management software to just track my tasks by, deadline and urgency, but that's sort of basic day-to-day stuff. At a more 30,000-foot level, no matter what decision you're making in a role like town administrator, any leadership position you're making, you should always be keeping in mind the organization's top tier goals, and you folks set those. The Board of Selectmen sets those. So whatever decision you're making, if you feel like you might be lost in a situation like you just asked about, where you might not know all the answers right away, the first thing I do as a public sector executive is keep in mind and remind myself of what we're trying to accomplish here long term. And oftentimes that is a good compass for you in any situation to base your decisions on. You know, you folks probably know this, but in municipal government, it's often the management style is often sort of managed by exception. That is, you know, there's always a crisis of the day in municipal government, small or big towns, and you might have your day planned out, and you should, but oftentimes something comes up that you didn't expect that you need to deal with. And so that's sort of the managed by exception rule. You put out the fire, so to speak, first, and then you focus on a long-term solution after that. You know, there's always I love this quote, the Eisenhower quote, which I also always butcher, but he said something to the effect of, in war, plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. So the exercise of planning you have to do, but oftentimes when it gets to game day, you know, when it gets to the battlefield, your plans often get thrown out the window, but the exercise of planning is really important. But also, I learned something that's lacking in government. There are a lot of planners, frankly, in government. A lot of people want to plan, and it's a really important exercise, but it's not worth much if there isn't a doer, so to speak, somebody who's ready to take action and execute the plans, because that oftentimes can be a lot harder than the planning exercise. So you need both. You need doers. I pride myself on sort of being an out-of-the-box thinker and an out-of-the-box doer, so to speak. So planning is really important. You have to align it with your goals, but also you have to have not only a plan to execute, but a proven track record of actually executing according to your goals and plan.
Okay. My turn again. Hindsight being 2020. Can you give us an example of something that you've done in the past and you thought afterward, I should have done that differently?
So I haven't done much if I don't have multiple mistakes to think about. So I picked one here, and it's a little lighthearted, but it is a good lesson that I did learn. February 2015, actually around the same time as I met that World War II veteran, there was a big blizzard. We were sort of weighing whether or not to declare a snow emergency, and you know that means certain parking bans downtown, you know, no overnight parking on the street, stuff like that. And I woke up. It was about 5 a.m. And the mayor, who's the chief executive in Amesbury, he called me or emailed me asking me to sort of take the steps necessary to carry out his snow emergency declaration. I had a high fever that morning. It was like 104 degrees, and I was disoriented. And instead of just declaring the snow emergency, the parking ban, and stuff like that, the public announcement, I went a step further, and I accidentally sent an email to all city staff, not essential city staff, and said we're closing for the day, because that's usually the next step. It's bad enough we don't want our employees to travel. Well, that's not what the mayor asked me to do. And he got in at about 8 a.m. and said, hey, you shut down the entire city. And so that's not what he wanted me to do. But you know, in retrospect, we laugh about it now. But the moral from that sort of lighthearted and slightly embarrassing story is that when you're in public leadership, especially as a public sector executive, as a town administrator, a town manager, or a mayor, you're always on the clock 24/7, and you always need to be, no matter what's going on. It wasn't a good excuse that I was disoriented with a fever. It doesn't matter. You have to fight through stuff like that, because you always have to be 100% on point when you're dealing with taxpayer dollars, when you're serving the public, because it doesn't matter what's going on in your own life. Your duty calls in this kind of case, and that's how I approach public service in general. Is I just take it very seriously, because we're representing a lot of people, and you know, as a town administrator, I would be trusted to carry out you know, the wishes of the public and in the interest of the public, and so that's a fun little lesson I had. Hindsight's 2020. I would have read the email a little more carefully and thought through my haze, maybe an extra cup of coffee or something. But the lesson that I took away from that, which is you always need to be on point and focused, was a much deeper theme for me.
Get this right. Very good. Dylan, you're up
Right.
again.
As the interim town administrator, you would be responsible for working closely with the finance team, many of which are here today, to manage the town's $11.7 million budget. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience working with municipal budgets?
Yeah, so as chief of staff in Amesbury, I was fortunate enough that the mayor was a numbers guy. He brought me in though pretty early on in my stint there to the budget development process, and really the long and short of it is I have extensive experience developing operating budgets, managing operating budgets, and even to some degree, sometimes we had to do things like implement discretionary spending freezes in the middle of fiscal year because of some unforeseen hit to revenue or unforeseen expense that we can't avoid. So I would work directly with the CFO and the mayor and all the department heads. The department heads would come in and request their budgets. We would meet with them one-on-one. We'd listen to them. We'd ask questions. We'd review it. Me, the mayor, the CFO. We'd review it. We'd go back and meet with them again with sort of maybe a trimmed down version of what their request was. And then then we went to the city council. It's a little bit different in Barre where it's a little bit more decentralized, but I have that experience working in more of a decentralized town form of government through my experience in Wakefield too. So one example was the development of the FY19 budget. We faced like a $200,000 to $250,000 gap just a few days before the budget was due. And we were scrambling. The House budget came out, and Ways and Means, and every year you guys go through this. Every municipality does, where you're adjusting to what the state's doing, and you're adjusting to new requests and stuff like that. We had this $250,000 gap, and the CFO, who was great at the time, he had sort of given up. He said, "Look, I've done everything I can do to trim down the stuff that we don't need." And he said he had made all the cuts he possibly could without cutting services. So I dove in myself, and I actually went through every single one, line by line. It was tedious work, but every single one of the roughly 700 expense accounts in the city operating budget to find places where, for a long time we've been overfunding without realizing it. Talk to department heads to sort of dig in a little deeper on some expense lines that I thought might be questionable. And ultimately, what I did was identify $500,000 in budget cuts that didn't reduce any services. It was just sort of cleaning up the books, and it's that type of work. The public doesn't usually really see it unless you do it. You don't really understand the struggle and the effort that it takes. And frankly, in most towns, it doesn't happen. It was a lot of work, and a lot of folks in municipal government don't necessarily spend that kind of meticulous attention on each budget process. And we did it. We closed that gap. That's one for me. I felt like personally was a sort of a crowning achievement in my professional career, because it sort of I felt good about proving to myself and to the leadership team that there's always more work to do. You can always put more in. With respect to municipal budgets, that's kind of what it's all about. If you really want to put forward a product every year that really is sort of bulletproof.
Thank you.
Matt, a portion for you.
Mr. Kinney, if you're offered this position, when would you be available to start?
Let's see. So I just looked it up. My commute to Barre right now would be about 75 minutes. So I could be there by 9 o'clock. I'm ready to go right now, folks. I'm ready to go. I'm really excited about the opportunity. I could literally start tonight even. I'm ready to go. So let that not be a concern for you folks with respect to my candidacy here.
Okay.
Okay. Now we've asked our questions. We'll give you a quick chance. We're pushing it on time. Let me see how we're doing. We got just a couple minutes left. If you have any questions you'd like to ask of us, now would be the time.
I would ask you folks the same question I asked the search committee, and I'd actually love to hear from all three of you if you have time. I'm sure you have different perspectives, but just in general, what are the biggest issues that you folks see facing Barre, and what are Barre's biggest challenges right now?
I'm going to start with Dylan on that one.
Well, this seems like a new era with the inclusion of COVID-19 into the lexicon. Seems like budget makers and policy makers from state, local, federal level are all scrambling, building the airplane as it's rolling down the runway, so to speak, in a lot of ways. So, we're a lot smaller than Amesbury. We're not going to be building any $7 million ice rinks, I don't think, anytime soon. So I'd say just our relative rurality, our commutes from Worcester, Fitchburg, our distance from Route 90, these are challenges that we have. It's not a lot of rental market, so harder for younger people to get started here. So we've got some challenges being a small town. I don't know if I answered your question completely, but that's where my head is at the moment.
Matt.
I'd say our biggest challenges right now, it is very similar to some of the things you said you had attempted to help resolve in Amesbury. It's our tax rate, our ability to bring in additional revenues and balance that with the community's desire to not lose the identity we have, being the rural town that we have. And so there's a fine line between both sides of that we're trying to crawl through and find our way through. It's been difficult, but trying to figure that out and find ways to increase our revenues. Generally, I agree with you. You can look at budgets and you can probably always find one more corner to kind of shave off a little bit. But at some point, even if you shave it off in 3 years, just standard inflation brings you right back where you were. So if you don't bring in the revenues, it appears to me that you're not resolving a tax problem ever.
You still need to grow out of it, right?
So, even as exactly. So we've got a balance where there's multiple boards that get involved in that process, whether it's the planning board working through the zoning laws, trying to help with bylaws that we can move forward in town to assist with, whether it's residential growth or commercial growth or potentially even some industrial growth. We do have some industrial areas in town. Working so that we can get all the committees kind of working in tandem is one of the things that affects that, because it's obvious that, if one board thinks we can do certain economic development things, but another board doesn't necessarily support the bylaws that would require it, it's a tough fight. And trying to figure out how to find that thing that keeps us in the happy medium, puts us in the middle so that we're still representing all the people of town, not just one sector or the other. From my perspective, it's that, trying to figure out how this town moves forward. Otherwise, we're going to start moving backwards quickly.
Thank you.
All right, well, that pretty much kills our time, but I'll just add briefly, I get the advantage of saying I agree with what both of these guys have said. COVID's presenting issues, and we were always looking for a way to increase our revenues without further burdening, and in fact, and hopefully lessening the burden on the populace in general, which means new business and new sources of revenue. I have other concerns. We get, see if I can say it right, the master plan development is something we're talking about in the planning board's been talking about getting into. We're very interested in development and master plan. I think that's very important, especially in both cases of what the other selectmen have said here. And I'd like to see, and I've been saying for 3 years, is building a better sense of community. This town was very splintered for a few years, and we're really starting to have people feel the sense of community again. And I think building that sense of community back and community involvement is important.
Well, thank you, everybody. I know my time's up, so I just thank you, and I hope to hear from you.
Thank you.
Very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny.
We should have just a couple minutes. Our next is due at 8:20. Is that correct, Heather? I mean, 7:20.
That is, she might be a couple moments early, but she hasn't signed in yet, so we have a few.
All right. I just want to address, I see Chief Carbone was on here. John, you're just calling, I assume, about the appointment? Your mic's off. John, your mic's off.
Yes, actually, it's that one appointment, but we also have to reappoint the other couple of guys for part-time.
Part-timers are annual appointments?
Yes.
Okay.
Did you have, I didn't have any other names.
Yes, I'm sorry. So we have, the current part-timers are Bobby Rutgers, Neil Lefebvre, and Robert Lambert. So in addition to the name that you have that we would like you to approve the hiring and appointment of, which is Matthew Mortarucci. You have Bobby Rutgers, Neil Lefebvre, and Robert Lambert for reappointment, but Lambert would be reappointed for 1 month only because he's leaving.
Okay, would any of you like to make a motion to that?
I would make a motion to reappoint the existing part-timers for the next.
It can't be, Matt, it can't be that motion. It has to be by their specific names.
Okay. I would like to make a motion to appoint Robert Lambert as a part-time police officer for fiscal year 21.
The other one, Bobby Rutgers.
I would also like to include Bobby Rutgers and
Neil Lefebvre.
Neil Lefebvre and appoint them as part-time officers for fiscal year 21.
Okay, I will second that motion.
Have a motion and a second. Do we have any further comment?
I do not.
Hearing none, Matt? Hearing none, I'll call for vote. All those in favor of the appointments?
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. That motion will carry. John, we already appointed Matt Roja. And if you have nothing else, we're going to move on to our next interview.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chief.
Heather, we are ready for Jessica, correct?
Correct, she should be in our panel right now.
Evening, Jessica.
Hi, how are you guys?
Very good. Jess, I'm going to give you a quick intro here that I'm going to read for you, and then we'll get into this. Good evening, and thank you for joining us today to interview with you for the interim town administrator position. Before we get started, we would like to give you an overview of how today's interview will work. My name is Greg O'Sullivan, and I'm the chairman of the board. Also with us is Matt Urban, the vice chair, and Dylan Clark as the clerk. We have attending our current town administrator interim, and that's Heather Monroe, and Sandy Hood is our administrator assistant. We also have several members of our finance committee and some other people online today in the Zoom meeting. We're being recorded and broadcasting live on YouTube channel, and will later be replayed on local public access station. We're looking for an interim town administrator to start as soon as possible, as our current administrator will be departing on the 30th of this month. We posted a second round for a permanent town administrator and expect to begin interview process for that position in early July and complete the process by August. We're looking for an interim to help us during this time, and will invite the interim to apply for the permanent position. The interview will last approximately 30 minutes, consist of 7 questions that we've divided up amongst the 3 of us. At the end of the interview, we'll provide you with an opportunity to ask questions that you may have of us. After all the questions, we'll thank you and ask you to depart the meeting while we discuss. If possible, we'll reach a decision this evening and invite a successful candidate to join us back at the end of the meeting for executive session to discuss contract terms. And Heather will be in touch at the end of the meeting to provide any additional information or follow-up.
Thank you.
Any quick questions before we begin?
No, I just want to thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for applying. Dylan will have your first question, so Dylan, you are up.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell us, please, why are you interested in this position?
Thank you. So I really plan on, being a great asset to the town of Barre. If I'm selected for the intern position, I do want to acknowledge that I'm interested in applying for the full time. I want to be upfront with that because I do want to express how interested I am in working for the town of Barre. I'm really interested in continuing to build on the great work that's already been completed over the past couple of years. I come from the town of Palmer. And so as you know, I do know your former town administrator, Andrew Golas, and I have been following his work here in the town of Barre. I think that he's done a tremendous job, and I really am looking forward to continuing on that work that he started. And I would also like to mention that Palmer has similar demographics to the town of Barre. We're a little bit larger, about twice the size of Barre, but as far as income and other demographics, we're pretty similar. So I think that my transition into the town of Barre would be a comfortable one. Although I don't want to say comfortable necessarily, because you can never be comfortable in a town leadership position. But I feel as though I may be dealing with similar things that I deal with in the town of Palmer. So that's why I'm interested in coming just a little bit down Route 32 down to Barre.
Thank you.
Okay, Matt, your turn.
Hello, Ms. Sizer. What do you think qualifies you for the interim town administrator's role?
So I have been interested in municipal management for a long time. It kind of happened accidentally, but one summer I walked into my town manager's office and I asked him if he was looking for an intern. And luckily, he had never had an intern before, but I was his first one, and he kept me on for about 9 months. I learned so much in that position, more than I have in any other internship position that I've been in, or any other role, really, just because of how busy the town manager's office, and I would say that's probably similar in Barre as well, how busy these offices are and how much, extra help is always warranted. So I was able to get a broad range of experiences. I started off, my first project we were just winding down from complete renovations of our town hall. So I was kind of like the exit checklist. I went through the whole town hall, found imperfections, and then brought those back to my town manager, and we had to have the renovators come back in and fix some things that weren't done quite to the expectation that we had. I was also able to work on human resources related projects, on the Complete Streets projects that we were kind of in the midst of Complete Streets at that point. And I also got to do a lot of day-to-day interactions with residents, paying bills, and also I worked a lot on the licensing authority, which is nice because now that I'm on the Palmer Town Council, I'm also on the licensing authority. So it's a nice, 180 from my experience in the town manager's office to that. And so I, really kind of experienced a whole range of things from, RFPs and grant proposals and everything. So I really feel like that experience opened up my interest in this profession. And I really, even though my resume has not been so consistent, and that was intentional, I didn't intentionally I only go for municipal opportunities throughout my experience, because so I kind of wanted to see what else was out there, and I feel I always felt like something was missing. Nothing ever compared to my experience in the town manager's office. So then I decided to come back and run for town council while I was an undergraduate, my final year at UMass as an undergrad. Luckily, I was successful. I ended up turning up the vote. Palmer had traditionally around a 2 to 3% voter turnout for annual elections, but I was able to make that closer to 10% by really focusing on my interactions with residents. For me, it wasn't, I do have a degree in political science, but I'm never really focused on the politics. I'm very, very invested in the institution, and I'm lucky that I have co-counselors who support that. You know, I work with the director of finance from Sturbridge. She's on our council as well. So I've learned just so much from everyone. And, you know, I've gone through 2 budget cycles. I went through one when I was an intern, and then where I was able to do kind of the, you know, behind the scenes stuff, cleaning up the budget, getting it prepared for inputs from the finance department and the town manager's office, as well as getting requests from different departments. And now as a town councilor, I just finished my 2nd budget cycle. And that was, you know, a very great opportunity just to go line by line. And this year, as you all know, is just not an easy year for budgets. And so it was that painstaking going line by line by line, just making sure that my town manager and my director of finance didn't miss anything, that we are being as conservative as possible. And as unfortunate as it looks right now, as conservative as our budget looks right now, we hope that things turn around in the upcoming months, and that we're able to you know, go back to revving up some of our projects that we're really interested in pursuing. I also have a really strong public administration and academic background, which I am very proud of. I also went to UMass for my master's in public policy, but I really focused on the public administration side of the degree because that's what I'm interested in. So I really pushed for local government administration course and a public finance course to be offered. Luckily, my administration at the school, they're very receptive to that, and they gave me that opportunity. I also had the opportunity to be a teaching assistant for a public administration undergrad course, which really helped me grind down those theories of public administration and really understand the study and the science behind all of it, and help impart that knowledge onto other students as well. And finally, I'm very involved in ICMA and the Mass Municipal Association as a counselor, and then also at UMass, I helped co-found the student chapter of ICMA. So I think those have been 2 really great resources to help me build my experience and knowledge. I know I'm young, but I have been grinding really hard behind the scenes to make sure that I'm as prepared as possible for a career that I really love.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next question should be an easy one. What do you see as the role of an interim town administrator, really, as opposed to a full-time position?
Great, thank you. So I know that you guys are really hoping for a short turnaround on this interim position. Unlike your last interim position, you needed somebody who had a strong finance background, who has developed budgets and could go through that process, that painstaking process, really efficiently for you all. But now I know that in a short time period, I'm not going to have time to develop programs and policy that I normally would be interested in pursuing as a full-time administrator, but instead just really working on the day-to-day, making sure that the machine is oiled in town hall, making sure that what you all need as the Board of Selectmen, that it gets done, and then also just making sure that you are all informed about what's going on. As well as pushing through whatever policy or programs that has existed, is going on right now currently, just making sure that I keep that kind of train rolling.
Okay, thank you. Dylan, you're up again. I just want to point out we've already used 10 of our 30 minutes, so we want to try to keep going.
Hey, can you tell us about how you go about handling critical items that you don't know how to do? What steps you take to get the education and knowledge to fill in the gaps that you might need?
Thank you. So in Barre, the first thing that I would do is I would really start off on a great foot, getting to know each of you all, and then also getting to know the staff members, the department heads, because you all really are the best assets within the town of Barre. And then outside of that, I have built a really incredible network, and I've learned over the years that my network is the most important thing that I can have in this profession. So I have a network all the way from North Adams all the way down to Plymouth, which ranges from town administrators to town managers, board of selectmen, town councils, consulting and academia, the state government. We share in Palmer, Senator Goby. I know her, in her office very well. I have a really great relationship. We also share Congressman McGovern too. Palmer is partially represented by him. So I do have a really great resource network that I can trust and rely on, as well as I think that the state websites offer a lot of great, useful information. And I'm used to using, a search engine I have done quite a bit of research in my time as a student and in other roles that I've held over the year. So I know how to weed out valuable information and seek out, valuable information versus a news article or something that's not backed by like a science.
Very good. Matt, your turn again, sir.
Ms. Sizer, could you tell me how you organize, plan, and prioritize your work?
So, over my short professional career, I have held many different hats at once. So, at all times I've been a full-time student, but there's been times where I've held internships and assistantships, and also the town council or running for office, and all of those different things have very pressing priorities, but I can't always be at same place. There's one person in multiple places doesn't work out that well. It leads to burnout, which and I do not like the idea of burning out. I've done it before and it's awful. So I've become much better at managing myself. As far as deadlines go, I really rank things based off of their deadlines. Is it a hard deadline? Can it be flexible? If an extension can be offered when there's something that has a hard deadline, you have to weigh those different projects. And then also something that is really important to me is the size and the scope of the project. So if a project is going to take me 2 hours to do, then I can do that a little bit closer to the deadline, versus if I have a project that is extensive and is going to require me to work with multiple departments. We're working with different schedules now. And so we're going to have a different scope of the project, and really want to make sure that everybody is able to put in a fair effort. So that's kind of my approach to project management, is just make sure that it's managed in a way that everybody who needs to have input has enough time and can give their capacity to that project. And then also, the research aspect of it. You never know, is it going to take, an hour to research something, or is it going to take more extensive time? And the other part of being in municipal government that I enjoy, actually, it's kind of a weird thing to say enjoy, but is just to expect the unexpected every day. And that's something that I learned as an intern, and that's something that I got so much adrenaline from, is that you can have a set agenda for your day, and then something just goes haywire, and then you have to, totally rearrange your schedule. And the most important part to that is communication, making sure that you're communicating that things that, need to change. So I would say that that's my approach to project management.
Okay. Well, this is sort of a fun question. Hindsight, 2020, we hope anyways. I'd like you to describe something you've done in the past, and when you were done, you sort of realized, I should have done it a different way.
Thank you. So I would have to say this comes down to two specific instances where I was in an internship for a nonprofit, and I knew early on that going into this kind of career field, anything in the public sector, funding is so important. You need to know where you're going to get your revenue from. And so I was always interested in learning more about grant application, grant management, that whole field. And I have advocated for it in my internships, but it never came to fruition that I wanted that experience, that I wanted to learn how those organizations went about finding revenue sources. And I think, in hindsight, I should have been more assertive about my interest, because I knew that these organizations needed that kind of work to be done, because as I just said, these nonprofits, we can't run without revenue. And it's something that I deeply regret not being more assertive about. And unfortunately, that's something that also didn't really come to fruition in my education either. We didn't really have any grant management courses. And that's something that I do, think about all the time, is that's going to be kind of like a red flag that I don't have a grant management, anything on grant management in my application.
Dylan.
Okay. As the interim town administrator, you would be responsible for working closely with the finance team and the budget committee to manage the town's $11.7 million annual budget. What is your experience working with a municipal budget?
Thank you. So as I stated before, as an intern, that was my first experience with a municipal budget. Palmer is a very small town, so it kind of requires a lot of hands-on deck to get a budget through. As realistically, you can expect it to happen in any town. You need to have a lot of hands-on deck to get a budget done. But I was lucky enough to really have some hands-on experience with that budget. Mostly, it wasn't anything too complex. It was mostly just preparing the budget for things to be inputted. Typically, this year is not typical, but we would give, 2% increases to salaried employees almost every year. And then whether that was in the final budget or not is a different story. But, just those kinds of adjustments in the software, just getting the budget ready for the more complex parts to be added. And then as a town councilor, my experience with budget is pretty extensive. The town council is required to make the decisions on big spending. So I've been a decision maker with my co-counselors on a lot of budget decisions throughout the year, as well as this past week or two, we are in the process of finalizing our 2021 budget, which I really went through with a red pen and a purple pen and a highlighter, and I marked almost every single line item just to make sure that we were being as conservative as possible. We are very, very lucky to have a great finance team and an incredible town manager who's fiscally conservative. And he was able to really cut back in any and every way possible, with the hopes that in the future we're able to kind of refund what we unfortunately had to unfund.
Matt.
Ms. Sizer, if offered this position, when would you be available to start?
I could have started May 6th. I graduated from UMass, first week of May. It's been hard. As you know, it's hard to hire in municipalities right now, and that's really where I'm looking, is to be hired in a municipality, and it's slow moving. Even other organizations I'm looking for, just the interviewing process, the hiring process is very slow right now. So unluckily, I've had some family things going on the past month where I've had to kind of divert my attention to that. But realistically, I do not like being unemployed. As you can see in my resume, I've been, gainfully busy over the past 5 years. And I really, really hope that this is a great opportunity to even be interviewing with you all. But if I'm offered this position, I could start as early as tomorrow. I could even do like a walkthrough tomorrow or whatever you guys need me to do.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that's going to wrap it up for our questions, and you do have a few minutes left, so if there's anything you'd like to ask the board, now would be the time.
Thank you. So I know, I guess the most obvious question, although I've been watching a lot of Board of Selectmen meetings from the past and really looking through a lot of information that you guys have on your website, I think an obvious question that I should ask is what are upcoming issues or projects that you would like to see happen in the town of Barre?
Start with Dylan once again.
Sure. Well, the planning board has put together a master plan, working on a master plan. That's an exciting upcoming project. I think that could be really beneficial for the town in a holistic sense. Otherwise, I think that we have a lot of potential with outdoor activity and just agritourism, and we're a beautiful area, as you know, and I think that being close enough to Worcester to get those visitors and dollars in and attract some new residents. Also, I think that there's good things on the horizon for the town, despite all of our COVID and other sundry challenges. So those are some things that I'm looking forward to.
Matt.
I'll just name a few things that have probably been maybe more recently kind of raised back up, but we have been discussing them for a couple of years, depending on one right now. We're in discussion, and it will be on the warrant for annual town meeting next Tuesday. Is funding to extend cable to underserved areas in town, or areas that actually have no high-speed internet access. If anything, they either rely on satellites, or they're working off of the old Verizon DSL just to get what they need and then be done with it. It's really important in these days, and I think our current pandemic has made it more in your face. You can't deny the need for high-speed internet if you want to retain your citizenship here. The people living here in the town are citizens. As we move on from generation to generation, we've got to keep up with the infrastructure, or people are not going to come back or move in or stay. It's going to start to fade a little. That doesn't mean we've got to take a farm and remove the farm. It just means we need to make sure the house on the farm can get cable, so they can be on the internet, because eventually they're going to need it, not just rely on it here and there, because that's just the way the world's moving. So I would say that's one of the bigger projects that I think we're looking to get moving sooner than later. We've also got different economic development items that have been kind of sitting there. We're trying to see what we can do to keep that moving. Dylan had mentioned the planning board's looking to move forward with developing a master plan, and that's going to involve a lot of different departments to get their consensus, so that when we write the plan, we don't have one board fighting another because they didn't agree with the plan. So that's going to be something that's rather significant. But on top of that, we have a constant, the 5-year capital plan. Our budget and our 5-year capital plan is something that always requires good maintenance, understanding the funding mechanisms, knowing how you want to stick to those funding mechanisms and how they relate to your capital debt schedule, how they relate to your view of the annual budget and revenues and what could create free cash. We just recently started rolling over free cash on purpose, so it would be there next year too, where before free cash was kind of like do everything you can and then throw free cash in stabilization if you have any left over. And So we've added in some things that allow us to have a little bit more financial flexibility when the time comes at the end of each year. So I would say those are right now high priorities that would sit on my desk.
I'll streamline that a little better for you with things we'd expect to come up for our interim administrator. Certainly the COVID issues are still evolving. The phases are changing, how that's going to impact our local businesses. We discussed briefly about some of our local businesses may want to use the common in some way, and we haven't really got into that question too far, how we're going to make that happen. But that's something that's going to be coming up in the short term. Other than that, we have a couple marijuana grows in town. I don't think the funds will be coming from those till late in this year, so we shouldn't impact you, but you may hear us start to have discussions on how that money might be used, because there's specific controls in place for how we may use that money. So I see that as our short-term issues right now.
Yeah. And if you don't mind that I just follow up on each of those issues. The master plan, Palmer, we just started the first master plan in 50 years. And I am lucky enough to serve on that committee. So I am really in the trenches on getting to know that process. And it is a fun process. I mean, this is what being a part of local government is. And it's been really great so far. Next week, we start with our public meetings, inviting the public in. So it's not just our steering committee working on it. Also, high-speed internet. That is definitely issues that we've addressed in Palmer most recently. I want to say we're at 100% right now as of last year. Everybody in town has access to cable and high-speed internet, which was a very difficult thing that I observed while I was an intern. People going through that struggle of not having access, and definitely amplified by the COVID-19 pandemic. We see that everywhere on the news all the time. And then also to your point, Greg, using COVID-19, using these phases, trying to use them to our advantage of using open space to allow our businesses to take advantage. Just yesterday, I was in the town hall with the local licensing authority giving permission to a local restaurant to expand into a park to serve their typical restaurant food, but also we had to give them the permission to serve beer and wine, and so and that was a really interesting process as well. So I'm really interested in using my experiences from Palmer and trying to help you guys out in Barre. But I know this, I'm at the end of my time, so I just want to say thank you all, and I hope to speak to you again in the future. And good luck in your search. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That does draw our time with you to a close. So what was the process? I don't know if Heather has a standby process for you.
I think I just leave. Yes, and then if I am selected, I'll come back. Have a good one. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay. We are at 10 minutes of, and I believe, Heather, our last one is scheduled for 8 o'clock.
Believe so.
You guys have anything you want to discuss quickly for a minute? Would you like to take a brief break before we get back into it?
Actually, I could take a brief break. Maybe we give a 5-minute recess, return at 7:55.
That's what I was thinking. I could use a restroom break myself. So we're going to step out for about 5 minutes then and make sure we're back here for 5 minutes of 8, and we'll continue. obviously we're back on, guys. We're just going to wait, I think, for this meeting. So I'm just taking time to finish reviewing the resume. I don't want to jump in early. I just soon take the time to finish going through our papers, if that's all right.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, we're almost there. You guys all set for this next candidate?
So,
Heather, do we have, how do we pronounce this? Let me get it right. Hold on.
Rhea, I do not see her yet.
Rhea, okay.
Just 8 o'clock now, so I'm checking email to make sure she didn't get, run into any issues.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just taking her a couple minutes to connect.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, I have my fun with this sometimes. Tonight it was my computer. For some reason, it just wasn't connecting to Zoom. Of course, I entered the standard passcode 4 times before I read it and realized we had a new one tonight. Ugh.
Greg, did you guys want to discuss something else and we'll give the candidate a couple minutes to see if she's able to join us or if something comes through?
I'll wait one more minute. If we don't hear from her, we'll get into other discussions and entertain her as she comes in.
Okay.
A reasonable amount of time, but before we get into something, we'll give it one more minute here.
All right, I think I see someone. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Hi, Rhea. Are you with us?
Like all of our COVID and other sundry challenges. So
Hello?
the things that I'm looking forward to.
Hello, Rhea?
Just in a few things,
Okay.
maybe more recently kind of raised back up. But we have been discussing them for a couple of years, depending
Hello?
on where
Oh, just
we're discussing, and it will be on the warrant for the annual town meeting next Tuesday, is
Rhea, if you're listening to a meeting live, can you hit mute on that so that you're not?
wires and things like that. Internet access. If anything, they're either
So Ray, I'm putting mute on right now for a second. If you could please make sure on your end that you don't have any sounds in the background. It sounds like you might have been listening to one of our meetings, and that's what's broadcasting over your audio. So I'm going to hit unmute again, and we'll see if we can hear you, okay?
Well, as the internet, if you want to retain your citizenship.
All right. Ray, I'm not sure if you can understand me, so I'm going to try to say it again. I'll also send it to you in written message here so that you have it. But I'm asking you if you can please make sure that you have mute on the background, because all we're picking up is not your voice. We're just hearing the sound of the video in the background.
I can't hear you.
Yes, you can't hear us because I think you're hearing over your video. I don't know if you can listen to the video and watch it because it seems to be delayed, and to listen to us, I think you're going to need to just put mute on your video.
If she's watching it from her computer, what she may have to do actually is stop what's looking to move forward with developing a keep playing through her computer even if she tries to talk. She's got to stop playing the video of the meeting while participating in the meeting.
The other possibility is to telephone in. Yeah, if we can't make the video anymore.
Hi.
Hi.
Good.
Can you hear us okay?
Yeah. Hi.
There you go. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm sorry. I was listening and I thought I'm not online yet. Yeah. Hello, I'm good.
Okay. I will start with a quick spiel I have to read here before we get going. Good evening. Thank you for joining us today for the interview for the interim town administrator position. Before we get started, we'd like to give you an overview of how today's interview will work. My name is Greg O'Sullivan. I'm the chairman of the Barre Board of Selectmen. I also have Matt Urban, who is the assistant chair, and Dylan Clark, who is the clerk. Attending also is our current interim town administrator, Heather Monroe, and Sandy Hood, who is our administrator assistant, as well as numerous members of our finance committee and other people who are viewing and who are listening online. We're currently being recorded and broadcast live on YouTube channel, and will be replayed on the local public access station. We're looking for an interim town administrator to start as soon as possible, as our current interim will be departing on the 30th of this month to take another position. We posted a second round for a permanent town administrator and expect to begin interview process for the position in early July and complete the process by August. We're looking for an interim to help us during this time and would invite the interim to apply for the permanent position. The interview will last for 30 minutes, consists of 7 questions, and we've divided those up amongst us. At the end of the interview, we'd like to provide you with an opportunity to ask questions that you may have for us. And after all the questions, we'll then thank you and ask you to depart the meeting while we discuss. It is possible we will reach a decision this evening and invite a successful candidate to join us back at the end of the meeting for executive session to discuss contract terms. Heather will be in touch at the end of the meeting to provide any additional information or follow-up. Do you have any questions before we begin?
No.
Well, in that case, welcome. And Dylan will have the first question for you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Could you tell us, please, why are you interested in this position?
Thank you for the question. The town administrator is in charge with executing the policies which was set forth by the town council, and is then responsible for the annual consolidation on the proposed budget and the administration of the budget
once it is adopted. I trust that my goals and my experiences have aligned with the roles of the job, and I believe that this is my experiences and my goals are reflective to the residents of the town of Barre, who are very peaceful and calming. I have to look on the logo because I was looking for the motto or whatever. And I believe I possess the necessary requirement for the day-to-day operations of the town government and policies and procedures. And I have faith. I have the combination of knowledge and experiences that I have devoted all my life. I was an elected city councilor for the last 17 years. For the last 7 elections, I ran independent, and those experiences in my life has been. I'm very local at the same time very international. To have received foreign studies, I've got master's level for public administration. First started at Ryokoko University in Kyoto, Japan. There we talk about participatory local development. It's enhancing the governance, that there is a participation of the community, that the community will feel a sense of ownership in the decision of the town. The community will feel that they are involved in every decision because they are part and they are programmed to do that. And that is the master's that I've got in Ryokoko University in Japan. And I also had a master's for land management, informal settlement regularization, that is in the Netherlands. And so there we talk about informal settlements amongst residences. I am, by the way, I was elected city councilor to about 200,000 population with a voting population of 115,000 people as of 2019 elections, and having a land area of 225.75 square miles and an annual budget of $30 million US. And I'm very, very interested for the position because I don't know any other job other than working for the local government. And I have been sent to 11 universities across 11 nations. That includes the Sweden and all other parts of Europe. And I have experience on town twinning and municipal governments from Asia to Europe. And this is my first time in the United States. That's why I'm very excited and at the same time tense, because I really wanted that my experiences and my education will be put to force and will be able to be functional, because I don't have any other commitment but to help the community and administer and continue the kind of commitment that I have been living all my life.
Very good. Matt, your question.
Ms. Agripo, what do you think qualifies you for the interim town administrator role, more specifically?
Yeah, I have mentioned on the specific purposes of the administrator. Actually, the town administrator will have the impression of the town administrator will bring the impression of the form and the composure of the town itself. So it is very, very important, and I feel I have exhausted all my life about studying. I have finished Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and have had a lot of masters and equivalent to master's level for foreign studies. From reproductive health and rights amongst adolescents to women and children to anti-trafficking and to local governance, effective management, and also for the execution, legislation, and budget review. And at the same time, I'd like to talk later on the budget, because I think the town administrator plays great role in the partnership of the town council for the identification and looking into the annual budget and everything. When I first started to be councilor, annual appropriation of my seat is only 6.6 million. That's the yearly appropriations, and because of the constant, I never stopped working on revenue generation, maximizing the utilization of revenues and tax revisions and everything. And right now, and recently in 2019, we have increased to 30 million SR. So this has been a great contribution in terms of policy, because I was working as a policy maker, but in my city, because of a lot of departments, we are not taking care of your policy, because once we make the policy functional and executable, it has to have a consultation to each of the department. So in the case of, like for the human resource, the budget, the planning, that everything, the cooperative office, or the elderly, the women and children, everything, they need to have a strong policy that has to increase their participation to the town, their participation to the city, and of course for the city government to increase its revenue in order to get back in the form of services. So yeah, I believe I'm very qualified, because I have not just had 17 years experience, I also have exhausted myself on a wide range of education. And right now I'm doing an online course for this American Public Policy, which is very new to me because I'm homegrown in Europe and Asia for local governance. And so I'm very excited, and I hope I'll be able to be functional. I'll be able to put this into use.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a quick question for you. Is what do you see your role as the town administrator, interim town administrator, being as as compared to a permanent position?
Yeah, I understand the responsibilities, and that goes far with a full-time town administrator. I am a person who once I have to render commitment. I have to do all my life. I never had a child. I never had a responsibility on my personal life. So all my life is devoted to the kind of work that is set forth in front of me. And so the role of what is town interim is, though it is temporary in nature, that covers only 2 to 3 months until and when this full-time vacancy will be filled up. But if given a chance to work for the interim, I would like to treat it as if it's really 100% full-time job, because at the end of the day, it gives onto the impression of the kind of leadership that you have exerted and you have, that gives impression and gives the honor to the town, and that I hope it will be able to bring benefit to the town in general.
Thank you. Dylan will have another question now.
Sure. Could you tell us about how you go about handling critical items that you do not know how to do? What steps you would take to get the education and knowledge to fill in some gaps that you might need?
I run as an independent councillor for the last 7 elections. It's kind of hard work. It's very hard working campaign on your own. It's very difficult to campaign on your own. And I have learned that the only way to overcome it is to overcome obstacles on achieving your goals, on how you would like to portray, how you would like the city or the municipality or the town to be progressive, is to educate myself. It's the only way to overcome it. And how I'm going to do it, I have studied on not only the population, the land area, the terrain of the municipality, but also the people. The people's attitude, like this reminded me of a case study in India, that there is this town twinning, and then all the people that born in that municipality has a genetic effect. And so they check on everything from the environment, the kind of air and everything that these people have been receiving in that kind of municipality, meaning the purpose of town management, town administrator is to give extreme and sufficient leadership to to the community or to the members of the municipality that needs to be addressed to. And I would like to go back to the situations where I thought it would maybe have helped if I run with a national party. Because when you run with a national party, maybe it's very safe for you. It would be easy. You will not have problems with the machineries. But then it gives me better understanding that I even want number one being independent. So it has to have, in the end, there was a point in time that I think I have to make a decision that I have to reach into a partnership with a national party to finance my campaign, to help me with the media and everything. But this situation is already remote, so I looked for options that makes me win. And so running independent even made me even stronger that the rest of the opponents were even defeated.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Agripo, tell me how you organize, plan, and prioritize your work.
The first step is to know what the work is, what it consists of, and break it down and prioritize. I would like to do those that which are urgent and important, and I would like to calendar and schedule those that which are less urgent but is important, and I would like to delegate. I wanted to bring emphasis on the delegation. If you are in a situation where it is urgent but is less important, and I will never do those that which are less urgent and less important.
Very good. Hindsight, as you know, is 2020. Could you give us an example, please, of something you've done in the past and made a decision on, then thought better afterwards you may have done it a different way?
Yeah. It's a kind of confronting when you're confronted into a situation where you have to come up to reaching the goals that you wanted to do. Changing the decisions, normally if it's confronted to the majority, like what I mentioned a while ago, being independent has to even make me stronger. And after winning, because this time that time it's like I feel there was a declaration of weakness and a change of mind, but it turned out that when you exert and when you are very positive and you want to achieve on things, and you are in the right direction, and you have to set for the goals that how you're able to do what you wanted to do, especially in governing the city or in the municipality. It turned out that after winning, recently I would like to mention that I ran for Congress in my district, and I was supported by the governor of the province, and I've got all the support, the kind of support that I never imagined in my whole life, because as always when I run as councillor, I run independent. But this time, I'm being helped by the provincial governor, which is very powerful political party. But I lost it. That's why I moved to the States. When I lost it, the people were saying, you should have run the way it was before when you ran independent. So this our situation when the people were saying, if you run independent, maybe you would have won. And you lost it because this is a kind of different norms that we have experienced and have known about you. So when they said, you will, like the saying goes, you will encounter many defeats, but you yourself must not be defeated. So it did not take me a long time to realize that, I have to get even more master's degree and to even study and to understand foreign policy and public policy and even local governance, so that I'll be able to put it into function and office.
Okay, thank you. Dylan, one more question?
Sure. As the interim town administrator, you would be responsible for working closely with the finance team to manage the town's $11.7 million annual budget. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience working with a municipal budget?
Yeah, when I was a counselor, I was very active, and I was very proactive in coming up with legislations that protects the revenue and generates and maximizes the revenue, and to help the citizen, you know. But I made sure I will be able to anchor legislations and generate even more support to the programs and objectives of the city, with particular attention to industrial development and the citywide growth and progress. I have passed resolutions and ordinances granting franchises and authorizing issuance of permits and licenses upon such conditions intended to promote the general welfare. I have, at the time when I was working as a counselor, I authored ordinances and resolutions regulating activities relative to the use of land, buildings, and structures within the city. I am aware when the budget, which have started 6.6 million, is now $30 million in the fiscal year 2019. I authored policies that turned out to be the key reason for the increase of the revenue. As member of the committee, will legislate accounts and appropriations derived from revenues, taxes, fees, loans, revisions of tax measures, and other sources in the form of revenue. We do investigate funds, anomalies, malfeasance, nonfeasance, practice of officers and employees of the government, and offer and other discrepancies involving government funds. So normally, these are the job of the legislation to even polish on the annual budget, the expected, the projected, and the actual expenditure, and to come up a comparison of how we had it in the past, and if there was even improvement in the past, and if we want to make an improvement as to collection of revenue, and if there is an increase, and what are the programs and objectives that we have made a priority in the past preceding year, the preceding fiscal year, and to the current. So financial control normally is being polished in terms of policy, and so the council have prepared and submit accountability reports, like I've said, for the past and current year, and so the estimate of income and appropriations covering the current operating expenditures and the capital outlays, everything, budget preparation, budget legislation, budget review, all those I have seen how the city have grown. And I'm very happy about this opportunity that I saw the interim town administrator, because I will be able to know how it is in the ground, because I think it will help if you have undergone legislation in your life as your experience before you'll be able to administer the appropriations together with the councilman.
Thank you. Matt, your last one?
Well, thank you. One last question. If you're offered the position, when would you be available to start?
I've got authority to work in the United States, and I am very excited for any job that is relevant to administration of the local government, and I am very available immediately.
Thank you.
Very good. We have gone past our allotted time slot, but we started late a little, I acknowledge that. So we have about 2 minutes left. I'll give you an opportunity to ask a quick question of the board if you'd like.
It took me, because I got the notice that I'll be perhaps included for the interview tonight, was just yesterday. And so I have to look into the composition of the town of Barre, and I wanted to know on the different departments, like the plumbing and everything, and I wanted to immerse myself, and so I'll be able to know. And I am also very happy that there is an opportunity to ask questions, but I think right now I'll just go through with the website of what is the current activities at the town of Barre, if that would merit if there would be an opportunity for further interviews, so that I'll be able to know deeper. So thank you for the opportunity that you gave for a question, but it's fine as of now. I wanted to know on the system and of the entire town, and it's on top of the challenges that we are now facing, like the COVID and everything. I wanted to know to which direction the town of Barre is heading to, and it's a very stable town, and I wanted to know what they wanted to achieve even more. And so maybe I'll be able to learn that on my readings, and if there are opportunities in the future for further interview, I would be very grateful.
Okay, thank you very much. We have used up our allotted time.
Just
We'd ask you to,
one last thing, please.
Matt, sure.
Just to give you a good idea, if you go back and continue listening to this interview, and the previous interviews, you will hear a little bit more about some of the things we talked about, where the town's at and where we're looking to go. So if you watch the previous interviews, that'll also help answer some of your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have a good night. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay. See if I can find our agenda doc. So we'll start, if any of you wants to start, we have a quick discussion on the three. You have, I have a feeling for what I'd like from the three. I don't know if you both do as well, but we can certainly begin a discussion about these candidates if you wish. I would like to. Matt, Dylan, your thoughts?
Would you like to start, Dylan?
Sure. Just quickly, I liked what I heard from all three of the candidates. I feel like they have a different set of experiences than directly pertain to the town of Barre, just because, the towns of Wakefield and Amesbury are much larger. Town of Palmer is fairly similar. I don't know much about the town council form of government versus the Board of Selectmen form of government. But I think that Miss Sizer is a very compelling candidate. I spoke with Andrew Golis earlier today, and he had just only glowing things to say about her, and I take his recommendation fairly seriously. So that's what I'd have to say off the bat.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Thought Mr. Kinney definitely brings a lot to the table: experience, knowledge, understanding, working within municipal government, and the various networking and connections you kind of need to have with that. I think a lot of that as an interim is, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but it may be more than we need for an interim. But I think it would also be good. You never downplay a skill set or body of knowledge in that regard. He seems to understand planning, being prepared, trying to keep things going, but also look forward. He definitely had some good answers and some experience on some things that we may be facing, but how that actually translates to Barre based on our size and our budget, I'm not sure if it does. When it comes to the economic growth and what he was talking about, he was able to participate in with Amesbury kind of turning around some of the things they had going on. I think the scale makes it harder to do that here, as well as location. But not impossible, so I think he can add a lot to that. Regarding Ms. Sizer, I feel that maybe she doesn't have the working experience, but she comes with a thirst for knowledge, as well as an education that starts with a great basis for knowledge. Her experience and desire to be involved in her local government, even being on the council or the counselor the role she has currently. I think she could bring a lot to this town, especially as an interim. I think she's got the energy to kind of tackle the old to-do list and make sure she stays on top of the whole list. I liked how she referenced how she prioritizes things. Not just including when is the deadline, but what's it take to accomplish that deadline, I thought was good to hear. It's kind of for some people might hear that and say, well, yeah, that's what you expect, but that's not what everybody says or thinks. So I think it does make a difference. I think Ms. Agrippo brings a lot of knowledge and experience, and I felt a passion she has for local government. Even though the more you read the education and the experience, it seems like her knowledge might be at a higher level than just what local government is, at least from, or maybe I'm misunderstanding the words used, from her education through Europe and the Philippines. Maybe what's to me seems more like a higher, like state or federal level of policy making. Maybe I'm just misinterpreting the words and the titles and the naming and the resume, and maybe it's more of a local level that she was more involved in. I'd be a little concerned with her lack of current knowledge about Massachusetts law and local government here as an interim, because I think that does help with what could be a short-term experience, being able to take that information and go with it. But if she's good at relying on, our staff, they would help. So it really comes down to how well she works with people and how well she uses her resources. And I don't feel like she has a problem doing that, at least the way she answered her questions. I think all three of them could do a good job, especially for what we're going to need to be asking as an interim. But I would still favor the first two interviewees at the moment. They have much more experience with Massachusetts law and local law. So right now I'm still favoring Mr. Kinney or Ms. Sizer. Basically because of that experience in Massachusetts, and we are talking about the interim position. I think having that experience coming in just to make sure that you can keep things moving is important. Maybe from my perspective, I might favor Ms. Sizer for this role, although she doesn't quite bring the same experience Mr. Kinney brings. Partly because I think she definitely showed an energy to go after things. I think after we get through annual town meeting, it's really more about that, taking care of the business put in front of you, rather than creating the business to put in front of the town and figure out what the town wants us to do. I mean, once annual town meeting's voted on, it's pretty much, here's our list of things to do this fiscal year. So it's down to managing, networking, working towards a goal, kind of following the lead of the Board of Selectmen and what we're trying to ask of that. But also working with the other boards, because obviously the town administrator works with mini boards. Answers directly at the Board of Selectmen, but the role includes a lot of parts of this town. I don't know about you. I for some reason, the two responses in regards to, I think the question was, how would you, what do you see as the role of interim town administrator, I think was the question. And I noticed that Mr. Kinney didn't necessarily identify it as different than being a town administrator. He said he would approach it as if he was a town administrator and keep moving forward and trying to build kind of those long-term goals and plans. And that's something I want from a town administrator. It's not necessarily what I think is what I'm looking for in an interim. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It really comes down to how it actually works in practice versus just words in an interview. But I thought Ms. Sizer's response of recognizing this is interim, I'll be focusing on what we need to do now to keep it going so somebody could carry the torch moving forward if she ends up not being the town administrator. And there was just a part of me that saw that as a different approach or response, and for some reason I felt that was better for this position.
All right, I will throw my 2 cents in here. I agree, Ms. Agripo is definitely got a lot of experience, worldwide experience, in larger government experience. But I just don't see it being a good fit for Barre for this position right now. We don't have that municipal experience in the, specifically the state law experience we need in Massachusetts. The interim I see is going to be someone that can step in once again. And we'd rather have someone that comes in, understands what they're doing, and can be seamless. To me, the best of those three for that seamlessness was Evan, but I certainly did like Jessica as well. I think they both interviewed well. The experience with Jessica isn't as great in duration. She's obviously just finished up her degree, and myself, I look at the interim as a great opportunity to interview somebody for permanent, and it gives us a chance to see what somebody can do. And they're gonna sink or swim in what they do as the interim. And if I prefer to pick an interim that I consider on a permanent candidate. I'd have to delve further into Ms. Sizer's experience and look at it more carefully to decide if I think that it warrants the experience/education combination, because we did ask for a master's degree with 3 years in administrative experience or something comparable.
Bachelor's was 3 years or comparable.
Bachelor's was 5 years, I believe. But she does have some experience, and that definitely, I think she has enough of the combination that we can qualify her. I do believe that. But I'd like to take a better look at that too. And it's a little more risky because she hasn't done this job. She hasn't done this position. She's certainly been interning in all these other jobs. She's held her interims while she's gone to college. So she's never really done these on the full-time basis, especially in the head position. So I feel she's a little inexperienced to hand this position over to her, even at an interim point right now, because because she just doesn't have the real experience. You know, all this time she's had as an intern is while she goes to school still. The everyday working, 40 hours a week, full time, the real experience of going through these things just isn't there. It can't be there. And the sort of picture frames she gets to see it as an intern. And because of all those things, I lean strongly towards Evan. So see if those opinions will go around one more time, see if the other statements to us make any difference to anybody else. I think we agree we're down to these two anyways, and I like them both. They were very personable, they were very likable, they seem very intelligent, but I just feel that there's just not quite the experience to hand this position over to Ms. Sizer at this point. Dylan?
Well, I would say Mr. Kinney certainly has a longer experience, and Ms. Sizer is a local, young, keen, running for town council while still finishing her studies and doing internships and working with the Economic Development Council. So that gives a little bit of a regionalization feel that would be similar to what we have to work with. So between the two of them, it's a pretty tough call.
And I will throw out on her behalf that she did cite that she has some rapport with Senator Goby. We don't know without talking to Ann if she really knows her well or knows much about her, or if it's a name drop. We don't know. But it was a good point to make. She does know it's some familiarity and an understanding that she's an important figure in these local politics and in budget making procedures and things. But I'm sure Evan knows that as well. But I didn't want to point out something that I thought was a positive. Matt, any final thoughts after?
No, I mean, I definitely see positives for both of Mr. Kinney and Ms. Sizer. And I'm only focusing on those two because it seems like a consensus of the board right now is focusing on those two. So I don't mean any disrespect to Ms. Agreed.
That's agreed.
Great.
But I guess now I'm trying to look at, I guess the truth is if you hire somebody as an interim, is it likely they're not going to go take another job while we continue to find the full-time? So is it a benefit to hire Mr. Kinney if we think he's a strong, viable, long-term candidate so that he doesn't go get a job while we're interviewing for that position? That's something I guess you got to think of is, are you thinking you might lose a fish if you don't make a decision? Ms. Sizer, I think, depending on how she shows, if given the opportunity, could change the whole dynamic on the potential long-term town administrator position too. Because as we both mentioned, that it doesn't matter which one gets it. If they get it, they got an audition. They're showing us what they can do, and it's not a position you can really show what you can do in an interview. You can talk about what you've done. The most I usually get out of an interview is trying to get it's more a feel of the person and how would they take whatever skills and experience and try to apply it to what we're going to ask. Also trying to better understand the relationship of the board with a town administrator. Not every person sees a town administrator the same way as maybe a board member does, or the general public here in Barre may have an impression of what the board's supposed to do versus a town administrator, and that all plays a role. So with that said, sometimes certain town administrators may be great town administrators, but they don't really fit this town because we as board members are asked to be very involved. We're not the type where hire a town administrator and then kind of just, they're doing it, ask them, they'll tell you what's going on. We need to know what they're doing. And we need to be involved and kind of, that's how I believe the town wants us to act based on what I've heard and how I went through the whole election process and what I thought their expectations is the majority of the people that voted, at least I think for me, voted because they thought we were going to be active and involved, and sometimes certain town administrators or people in that role may not be as open to that. They like a little bit more autonomy in how they work, and so part of the interview process is trying to work through that and get a feel for that. How do they, I mean, everybody's got to earn trust. I don't care if they were a city manager and we were a city council and we hired them, and it is all on them after we hire them outside of voting on policy, but you're still going to have to do the old kind of trust but verify process with anyone. You can't just let them do their job and not pay attention and then hope it doesn't blow up on you later. But there's a certain level that people appreciate that kind of that oversight. You know, some don't want to see any of it. They're comfortable with it, and it's like, but some people do well with that type of leadership and direction and kind of like, okay, I see where we want to go. Let's make that happen. And so I couldn't really use that right here between the two to figure that out. I didn't get a good feel either way on either of them as to how they feel about a board of selectmen being actively involved in where we go and what we're trying to accomplish.
I think one other thing I want to say before we think about taking a vote here is part of what we talked about, or I pointed out for short-term goals here. We do have COVID issues to deal with. You know, these COVID issues are dealing with and implementing what comes down from the governor's office at the state level, keeping track of our funds that are designated for COVID, as well as the CARES Act money that we have to deal with. These things are, I think, probably better handled by somebody that's got more experience with this at this point. I like both candidates, and I would like to have the chance to look further into their resumes and help, hopefully, maybe when we do the full-time position, have personal interviews someplace and meet these people in person, because I think it would be very important to pick the permanent position and have the interviews in person. But I still feel strong because of, I think Evan brings the knowledge and the familiarity with the office and the ability to once again pick things up from Heather on a very short notice, pick things up, understand what she's talking about, what those things mean, and continue on with what's going on in the office, especially when it relates to the COVID issues and governor's orders and things. I just feel that we've got a better chance of that being seamless right now with him. And if that was the case, I would strongly encourage Ms. Sizer to keep her application in for the full-time position, because I agree, she's young, she's energetic, she's local, and much for the reasons we like Todd Miller is because of that. It's someone's local to the area that gets this. Western Mass is different, than Amesbury area. It's very different. I've lived in Haverhill. It's a different area and a different culture in that area than it is here in Western Mass. I still like him for the interim position. It could give someone a leg up if they do well at it. It could show someone's gap as well, from what he knows and what we do here in the smaller town. And I don't call it out as a benefit or negative, but has the potential to be either for either candidate. I'm just looking for more of the continuity. I think that our better choice is to go with Evan because of that. I would like to, I think, unless somebody has something different to say, I would entertain a motion from either one of you, and we'll move from there.
Are you open to getting any input from we need the finance committee or others that are participating in this?
I don't think that's as important right now as it will be when we do the full-time. If we do these interviews full-time and take more public comment, we still have more things we'd like to get through with the finance committee this evening, so I'd rather keep it more streamlined. But certainly you gentlemen could make a consensus to do otherwise.
Do you think, would you entertain the idea of asking Sandy to weigh in? She would be the one working alongside the interim day in and day out. Wondering if that would be something you would entertain, Mr. Chairman.
That's reasonable to me, certainly.
If she's interested in chiming in, of course.
I actually suggest we don't ask her. Nothing against her input, but it puts her in a position where if she says, I like this person or that person, it either gives her favor because we choose the one, or it might put her in a corner because we didn't choose the one that she publicly announced what her position was on. I just don't know if we should put her in that position. Nothing against your input, Sandy. I just think in this format, because you technically would be working for this person, fine line of a conflict of interest there, depending on how far we go with that.
And that's why we all
Fair
try.
point.
I'm going to agree with Matt. Let's not do that.
Point well taken. Point well taken.
Heather may or may not have an opinion. We could ask her as well. She did, as we asked, and give us the first 3 applicants for this, because that's what we wanted for time of the essence. The permanent position, we're taking all applicants to that cutoff date, but this was the first 3, and I would ask Heather if she has any thoughts for the importance of the interim position and what may be a pro or con for us with our decision here.
Sure. So a couple clarification points. So Jessica, I know you guys are talking about her education. She does have her master's of public policy. She received that in May. So her
Yes.
master's is complete. As
I was
she
just
talked about,
clarifying, our advertisement didn't ask for a master's.
Oh,
It asked for a
correct.
bachelor's.
Yep. But I just want to make sure that folks who are watching at home know that she actually has her master's. She's not in the process of getting it. She completed it.
Correct.
She talked a little bit about being an intern in the office of town manager, where she was actually, if you check out her resume, she talks about some of the projects with the RFQs, town remodeling, liquor licensing, motor vehicle licensing. So she's had some exposure and experience with those. I know one of Dylan's questions earlier was relative to town council. So there's different forms of government in Massachusetts. Sometimes it's like the city government, you'll see there's a city council and a mayor. In towns, you often see there's a board of selectmen, a town administrator, and a town meeting. In town council forms of government, you don't actually have town meeting. The town council acts similar to a city council. They actually create ordinances themselves, and they have a lot more authority, and they see a lot more of the pieces. It's just a matter of how much it's balanced with the town manager. So I imagine being on town council, she's actually been exposed to quite a few of the things. One of the things she had mentioned in the board you guys brought up when you were discussing the 2 candidates is she does have more exposure to the smaller community. As we all know, I come from a large city, and working in a large city, it's totally different. When you are in a city, even as chief of staff, you do often have the benefit of having department heads. So you have a assessor and a chief auditor and an HR person and IT, all these things that we don't have the luxury usually of having in small towns. So you have a lot more hands-on. So even as a town councilor, she would have been exposed to a lot more of the smaller town element, and some of what she talked about. I mean, she did address, I did like the fact that she asked questions, and then based on the answers the 3 of you gave, she was actually able to come back and follow up with her direct experience for each of the things that you guys had brought up. So I like that. I liked her candor. I like the fact that, she brought right up that she may not be the strongest finance person in the world because she doesn't have as much exposure, but I think she's right. I think, come the first month or two of the fiscal year, things will be a little bit easier on the finance. FinCom, they're brought right up to speed. When it comes to Evan, I think he also did a great job answering many of the questions. I guess my concern there, and I wish we had the opportunity to follow up, was just one of the things that is, you just want to know how he would answer it, is on the fourth question regarding, that he's always learning and so forth. He also was talking quite a bit about learning how to delegate. So one of the things I always wonder when we have folks who are interested in these types of positions and they talk about delegating, it's obviously delegating, yes, important, but to what extent, right? You want to know, does this person really understand that, you can delegate and you can say, hey, Sandy, can you help me make this phone call? But you can't necessarily say, hey, Sharon, hey, Jean, can you write the budget, right? So there's a line of the delegation of what you can actually delegate and the fact that ultimately you're going to be on the hook and responsible. So it's totally up to the board how they wish to go. I think they both would be great candidates in the long run. They both have a lot to learn. And I think it's all about what the board thinks is the best fit for the town and who they think are going to be able to step in and really kind of pick up. I mean, I have a very comprehensive document. I think I'm up to 20 pages. It'll be closer to 40 by Monday. With everything that Andrew had left me, anything that we've worked on since then, all of the contacts, all of the next steps. So, I mean, a plan is essentially there with what to do and who to go to on all of those pieces. It's just a matter of who you think is going to be able to step into the role, collaborate with the other departments, get along with folks, and communicate.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
I like her observations and I understand her observations. And my reservations are still the same, that the experience, even though on the town council side of that experience, town council is more legislative, much like that the Senate and the House are to make rules and laws for the state. They basically replace the town body at town meeting. It doesn't mean the day-to-day management and budgetary experience that we really need right now is there. And I'd rather not take the risk that experience and that isn't there, because it's a day-to-day that we need to continue right now. And I believe that Evan does bring a better opportunity to continue on that day-to-day. And once again, if we do find out that he leans on other people, he needs other people to delegate things to and to write things for him and such, that would be a fallout that would, cost him the opportunity for a full-time position. Whereas, I think that Ms. Sizer is expected to lack experience and to falter and struggle. And it's, bringing her in, I see, would be grooming her to see if she can do what we want to consider long-term at the expense of this interim position. And choosing Evan gives us confidence that we're going to flow through this interim well and can look a little harder at the permanent. So I see, if there's two candidates here that we're looking at, I think, to me, clearly, Evan's going to probably be able to do a better job as an interim. And is that the purpose, to find the interim, or is the purpose to give someone a shot to kind of see how they play out for permanent? Because this would be a great opportunity to do that with Ms. Sizer. If we want to see what Jessica can do for permanent, this is a great time to see what can happen with minimal risk. It's only 2 months as an interim. See how things shouldn't get that bad. So that's your basic choices. Are we trying to get through the interim now as smoothly as possible, or are we trying to use this as a trial position? So my thought was get through this and get to the permanent position. That's the purpose of this. But
I'm just
Matt?
When it comes to the managing the budget, once you get through annual town meeting, managing the budget falls a lot more on the town accountant, the department heads. They're not creating a budget. They don't even start revisiting that until almost September. So I don't think that's a strength you need in an interim from July to September. And most department heads aren't even going to have a chance to overrun their budget before we get there. So that's kind of what the board is. So I would say that the budget impact of an interim coming in the next few months and what their benefit to the town is kind of minimal. I would put more weight on starting projects, developing projects, having things ready so that whether they or the next person coming in can carry forward would be something more important in my mind. Because when we come out of town meeting, there are going to be certain things. So it'd be more about, you know, how can this person make sure that the accountant and the treasurer are doing what they need to so that the fire chief can go buy an ambulance in a timely manner. So that's more of like a project outline where it's, all right, what do you got to do? You lay it out. What do you need? When do you need it by? You set your priorities and you make it happen. Similar with the cable and working out with the networking and getting that plan started of, okay, what are the steps we've got to take to get where we want to go? I know we don't need to do that by August because it's not happening by August anyway, but at least maybe we set up the outline and we get it prepared. So what I'm looking at is in July and August, I don't see that as the critical interim path. It seems like every time we have a critical interim path, it's always January through, like the last 2 times I've been involved with an interim town administrator, it's always been that budget season. That's not what we're going into, so I'm looking at it completely different. And I'm also looking at the fact that the interim is just that, it's an interim. And because that interim is not going through the budget process like we had asked Heather to go through when she took the job, I see this as something where maybe the town could even save a little bit of money and not have to pay the same rate that you would pay for the full-time while we get to a full-time position. So do I think someone just coming out of college versus someone that's been in Amesbury for how many years might be someone we could negotiate a slightly lower price? Maybe. I think that is something you got to figure. If you're down to the qualifications are close enough either way, what is your balancing point? And we've had this discussion in so many interviews that I've been involved in. I don't think you're surprised to hear me say it again. But if I'm gonna go through the interviews, look at the resumes and look at the people involved and what opportunities, I would say that Ms. Sizer could see this opportunity as a better launching off pad, even if she doesn't get this full-time position after it, but it gives her something to stand on. So she would be more willing to come in, give everything she's got, and we could possibly look at it as, you know, maybe we don't have to pay the same rate we plan on paying the full-time. So it's just something to consider. Other than that, I think they both can equally do the job, and I'm not overly concerned who gets it. So I'm not really saying it should be this one or that one. But I do think if she's going to be interested in the long term, I would rather see her as an interim to have a better feel for that. I've got a really good feeling already from Evan that if we set up interviews for the full-time position, I would expect him to go through the interview process again. And I'm not sure, just looking at the resumes, that I would have done that with Ms. Sizer. But if she has the opportunity to prove herself, I might think different. I've got nothing more to say. Okay.
I see Ms. Sizer as an investment. She also, if I'm not mistaken, she also expressed interest in the permanent position down the road as well. I feel like she has the good qualifications and a good slate of skills, interests, experiences. Her local network with the McGovern's office, Goby's office, and I feel like being someone who wants to stay in this area, a place like Palmer, not a lot of, not as exciting, not as many job opportunities as there is out on the North Shore, like Mr. Kenny, and I worry that he would do a bang-up job as an interim. I'm not worried about that in the slightest, but I wonder if that 75-minute commute will still have the appeal at the end of his interim position. If he does, he's going to factor that in one way or the other as to what he wants to do for the permanent position. Meanwhile, I feel like Ms. Sizer is, if she jumped into this and did a great job, I think that she would, given what I've heard so far, but that she could also look at the town of Barre as a real long-term prospect, and I think that the local angle is not to be discounted. But I'll say that both candidates I thought were pretty exemplary in some different ways, and we would be well served by both of them. But I feel like Ms. Sizer is the better route for interim in my mind.
As I said, I see two clear paths. We're taking someone that we think is the most qualified to definitely see us through this interim, or we're taking someone we're curious about and might not consider otherwise, which sounds like the consensus of where you gentlemen want to go. So I will make the motion that we offer this job to Jessica Sizer.
I would like to second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
Greg O'Sullivan, yes. I'd like to wrap this up before we consider getting back to the warrant articles. If you guys would like, I would rather, I don't think we need much time in executive session to discuss what we want to put together for an offer and bring her back in for that. Unless you would rather put it off, I would like to get it done and get the ball rolling and try to get her some overlap time with Heather.
So are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting we move to executive session to discuss, strategize for what we want to make for an offer for employment, and possibly bring her into that and make the offer, and then return to open session for a brief period, at least, to take some of these issues up with the planning board. With the finance committee. I've been there too long already. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I mean, the other option, I know the plan, but now I'm doing it too great. Thanks.
I'm sorry, my fault.
I know the FinCom has probably, they're going to have a long meeting again tomorrow evening. So one thing, if you guys wanted to do as well, it will take me a moment to call Ms. Sizer. If you guys wanted to talk with the FinCom about those couple of articles, and then I can at least get her on standby, because, it is already 9 something. So I want to make sure that she hasn't gone to bed yet. Or
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we take 15 minutes with the FinCom tops? If we're going to go beyond that, I want to get it to tomorrow. I don't want this to drag out unless you guys want to come up with a different time, 10 or 15 minutes even, we should be able to get through an issue.
That's fine with me.
That sounds good.
All right, so why don't we shoot for 10 minutes? And that sound good, Heather? We'll try to be back in 10 minutes.
Yep. And then I'll just let Jessica know that she's on standby, and I'll text her when she should come back in.
Yeah, I would anticipate our discussions in executive session should take us also less than 10 minutes to reach an agreement on what we want to do.
Okay.
I think, listening to Matt said already, I think we're of a like mind on this. I know I had you draw up the draft of what we started with you, and we can fill the numbers into that, and I think we'll be okay. So let's get with FinCom.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what specific, on the warrant, I'm guessing that there were some specific articles that FinCom was hoping to discuss tonight to have a better understanding before we went into the meeting tomorrow. Is that generally what this?
Now, what we were generally wanting to know was what you guys are voting on all 21 motions. You haven't voted on any yet.
That is correct.
So we were, trying to find out, what are you agreeing with?
We
So
have-
I thought maybe you were gonna go through and give your votes on these motions, starting from the beginning,
We thought about
rather than
that.
leaving it to tomorrow night,
I understand.
you know?
I was trying to also not have this meeting run too late tonight.
Yeah, I know, because we're gonna have a probably long one tomorrow night, so.
Without going to a vote, I mean, I could say personally, I don't have an issue with any of these items on the warrant. I believe, in my opinion, will be favorable in all of them. I'll know for sure when I go through tomorrow night, but I don't anticipate.
The two that we haven't, I don't think we'll have agreed on, was the ambulance, which Sharon isn't on anymore. Her and Jean, I've got a meeting with them, Zoom meeting, the team finance tomorrow, 1:00.
We'd be glad to talk about that.
And Jean was the one that was talking to me about the debt. So I'll ask her about that again tomorrow
Sure.
when we're at that meeting, so I can get it more clearly.
Our thoughts on the ambulance, to go quickly through it. Originally, this is something that Andrew planned to put on as debt. We have sewer debt that should be coming off after this year, and the payments for this wouldn't start till 2022 fiscal year. So this was a great way to roll that debt and keep under the levy limit where we want to be, while maintaining some. And when we had all the free cash, we changed gears. Hey, let's spend some of this free cash because we have it. But once again, because of COVID and the concerns that we're anticipating a possible couple hundred thousand shortcomings next year, I'd rather have that extra cash sitting in either our general fund because we don't roll it over in stabilization, have it available and make a payment on an ambulance than have that $285,000 gone if the crap hits the fan and we need it.
Well, see, Jean can explain more of that. The way she had explained to me, she didn't like the idea of borrowing. And then something about if you borrow it and then federal government decides they'll pay for an ambulance, then what do we do? So I would rather talk to her again tomorrow and find out definite,
Well,
ask her definite questions about it.
but to touch on that, Claire, if we borrow and then the government says they'll pay for it, it's no different than if we paid cash and already bought it, that the ship has sailed. We pick up another ambulance is the answer.
Or you just pay your debt off in one lump sum.
Yeah, I don't know if you can do that or not, so I'll clear it with Jean tomorrow and find exactly what she was talking about.
Fair enough, but that's what we stood on, and that's why we phrased it the way we did. You want to go back to Article 21?
Now that, the finance committee didn't feel was good, and Ted has left because he had figures and stuff on it. He said you don't have any plan for it. You don't know how much this is gonna cost or that. You're just taking money and just putting it. He was nervous about that.
We actually, back when Charlie was still on, we received estimates, and it was quite expensive to have the cables run. And it was, I believe, well in excess of $100,000. But this is a good starting point. It gives us the ability to pick certain roads or certain areas we can go after and start. There may very well be funding, grants we could get. There may be other ways to get the money. But we think 100,000 is a very important starting point to have available so we can make a difference on this instead of just continually talking about how to improve the internet and get it to the rest of the town. I'd have to go back and try to research your numbers. What was it, Matt? Probably 2 years ago we started. We year and a half, we get numbers in for the price to run.
He was
It might
looking
be the end,
for,
got some numbers per pole and per hookup and per mile. They give us prices that were pretty steep, like $3,000 a pole to tag to a pole.
Yeah, it added up, and there was one place, I think it might have even been Loring, where in order to feed it to that end of Loring, there's also a difficult terrain to get it to that section of the road. So you got to go downhill through yards, between trees. That's not a $3,000 pole on the side of the road. That's, I think that
road goes right through now.
$30,000 just put in 3 poles and run it through someone's yard to connect it to another street. So some of the things that were brought to our attention are also just as difficult to install because of the location as the desire of, do we really want to do that? Because if you recall, Loring Road has a long section of no houses between one end and the other. And that's why it doesn't run the entire length of the road. And it's the other end that's not well fed.
And the $3,000 per pole may very well be a cost to install a pole and hook to it, assuming that a lot of these areas don't even have pole service. Maybe, I don't know, we could get clarification on it, but
Yeah.
it became
Well, I
quite
think what we needed was, some concrete, why this dollar amount?
because it was
Something behind it to back it up.
the quote was well above that. I want to say it was over 200,000 to finish the
Well, we need to see. You can say that,
Right.
but you're not giving specifics behind it.
It
Okay.
was within Andrew's records. I do not know where he saved it in the electronic or hard copy files within the office. But it
I'm
was
sure-
something we received, and it may be buried somewhere because we haven't used it for a while, but we do have that information.
It was
That's
within-
why we were kind of thinking, like for special town meeting in the fall when we're set and we know and we can get some numbers, basic stuff of what exactly is going to be done on it. I know Ted had done some research on it and stuff. But
Why don't we see if Heather can dig something up for tomorrow night? I believe not only was it during Andrew's tenure, but it was while Charlie was still on the board as well, but prior to Dylan. You don't recall us getting final figures, do you? Where you've been on? Okay, so there's about a year and change.
yeah,
That had to come, and it's got to be in the latter part of that. So I would think if Heather puts a call in to Andrew, he might be able to steer it towards it quickly. We could bring that number tomorrow night, possibly.
that would be good.
And we'll
And
talk
also-
about it more then.
Just one last piece
Yes.
to that is, when I made the recommendation of 100,000, it was not with the intent that the town would ultimately pay for everything. It was hopefully share the burden with either the cable company or some state grant program or something. But the other part to that was not just to send a wire down the street. There are significant costs to have that wire brought to a house if your house is not within a certain number of feet of the street. And the idea was some of this money was also to be set up. And again, it's not finalized, Claire, I agree, but we've got to
Yeah.
work through our town council to better understand how we could set up a plan where we could set up like 5-year loans through this money where the town pays us back, whether it's a tax betterment charge or something. I don't know the right word, so I'm probably misspeaking.
Yeah,
I know that we can set up the program similar to how the CDBG was set up for people to have mortgages on their homes, where we can get people to get access of real hard line, high-speed internet, where the only reason they don't right now is because someone told them, namely the cable company, it's going to cost you $3,000 to connect, and it's all on you, because we got to go 500 feet away from the street to connect to your house. So,
Claire, is there anything else you'd like to discuss? Because we're getting close to our deadline to get back to a meeting here.
it's just those two things. Then I'll have Ted, I'll talk to Gene tomorrow.
Right.
And I'll have Ted come up with his questions because he was one that was looking into it and everything.
Okay, and we are at the 10-minute mark. Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone else, for
Okay.
staying on. Eric, I know that took a while, and I'm glad we got to get those out before tomorrow. But we do need to move into our executive session next.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well then, I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair. If you'll entertain a transition to an executive session. Will you entertain that motion?
Sure, we would go into executive session, Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, to
Yep.
discuss negotiations and strategy in regards to a compensation plan for the interim position.
Contracted non-union personnel. Yep. I second that motion, or
Alright.
did you just second that? Greg?
I was just.
I wasn't
assuring
sure.
us with-
I wasn't sure if you were making the motion yourself, Mr.
No,
Chair. So
no.
I will second. Oh, you're not making it. So
No, I'm not, no.
I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Number 2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel.
Excellent. Matt, you were seconding that, correct?
I second that motion.
I have a motion to second. Any further discussion?
No.
And any comment? Yes, please, I was gonna say.
Is the intent to come back to open meeting?
Yes, to make the
So I
announcement.
think we should include that in the motion, that we will return back to open meeting after the end of this executive session. Approximately 15 minutes from now.
Yes.
So we'll come back to open session at 9:40.
Matt, Dylan, you accept his addition to your motion?
I do.
So we have a motion and a second then, and I will call for a vote, please, by roll call.
Matt Urban, yes.
Dylan Clark, yes.
And Greg O'Sullivan, yes. Heather, please take the necessary adjustments to the viewing audience and let us know when we're ready to proceed.